Hello, friends, and welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. My name is Scott Cowan, and I'm the host of the show. Each episode, I have a conversation with an interesting guest who is living in or from Washington State. These are casual conversations with real and interesting people. I think you're going to like the show. So let's jump right in with today's guest. So I am sitting down today with Cassandra Overby, who is the author of Home Base Hiking Europe. Now, you might be wondering, what on earth does that have to do with Washington State? And I'll be honest with you, when her publicist reached out to me, I asked that question. But Cassandra is Washingtonian. She lives here. She's one of us. And so today, I'm going to sit down with her, and we're going to talk about her latest book. We're going to talk about hiking in Europe. Cassandra, I'm warning you, we're going to talk about the Austrian part of the book a lot because that's where Mackenzie lives. My daughter, she's part of this group. And so we want to talk about where she could go hiking home. So Cassandra, welcome.
Thank you so much.
And give my audience your life story. Well, I'm kidding. You grew up in Washington, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I grew up in Cedar Woolley, which is a tiny little town towards the north, and also Bellingham. And when it was time to go to college, I said, I will not stay in the state of Washington. And then I got a full ride to UW. And so I happily stayed in Washington for that and went to college at UW, got a business degree. So it's really funny that I became a writer because it was always just something that I loved doing, but it was never something that I intended to do for a profession. So spent about 10 years.
What did you get the full ride in?
So there's a government program. I don't know if you've heard of it. And 2 kids out of each legislative district in Washington get full rides each year. I don't know if they still do it, but when I went to high school, so I graduated in 2002, they were doing this program. And so if you had the highest grades and if they considered you the best package, the 2 kids in each legislative district, then you got full tuition scholarship to any of the state schools of your choosing.
So it was of your choosing.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. That's impressive. Okay. So you went to the U. I could tease you about that, but I would have teased you about any school because I went to Central, so I can make fun of everybody, including myself. Your alma mater just lost a very embarrassing game to the Cougars.
Yes.
Sorry, I had to, anyway. So you didn't think about being a writer. So what did you do right after college?
So right after college, well, I think we need to back up just a little bit. So when I was in college, I made this huge, fateful decision to study abroad. And I studied in Vienna, Austria. And so I lived there for 3 months. And then I went to Germany and I did a study abroad program in Germany. And during this time, I so fell in love with travel and got bit by the travel bug to the point where I very nearly quit college. I was very close to completely dropping out of the U as a junior and going back to Europe and studying art history. Thank goodness I didn't, because I think the way I did it was great. I'm very happy that I stayed with my degree. But that's when I got bit by the travel bug. So after I graduated, I didn't do the thing that most people do, which is go out and get a job related to their degree. Instead, I went to travel. And one of the first places that I went was Mississippi, and I became a relief worker after Hurricane Katrina. And so I was an art therapist down there, and I helped people. We helped build new houses for folks whose houses had been destroyed. And from there, moved to Ohio, North Carolina, and then eventually Guatemala.
Huh. That's an interesting path. All right. See, I was just thinking you started backpacking Europe because you loved it so much, but you went to Mississippi.
Yeah, I went to Mississippi.
I mean, you went to Mississippi. All right. So you ended up in Guatemala. What did you think about your time in Guatemala?
So Guatemala was actually supposed to be the first stop in a trip around the world that I had planned. So, we talked about how back in college I had done all this traveling in Europe, and I actually ended up going back for a second study abroad experience over there where I worked for a German company. And so I ended up spending quite a bit of time, and then I wanted to see more. So I saved up for this big trip around the world that was supposed to be my biggest travel to date, and went down there, spent 3 months as a house mom in an orphanage, and I had 30 little girls in my care. And the time down there was really amazing, except for after 3 months and after only having spent $1,000 of all this money that I had saved up, I ended up going home. And at first, I really couldn't describe to myself or explain to anybody else why I was pulling the plug on what was supposed to be my biggest adventure yet. I mean, I was only 3 months in, and I had enough money to travel for the way I was going, probably 2 years. But the truth was, when I got down to it, that I was just disenchanted with travel. I had done a lot of really great travel, and I had hit the point where it just didn't mean anything anymore to just see things. Like, sightseeing didn't mean anything. And there were long lines, felt like everywhere I went, there was bus exhaust, tourists and American pop music, French fries, all of this really international stuff, and not international in a good way, like international in a way that everybody gets when they're not really reflecting their own culture. And so I decided that I maybe had traveled myself out, and I had a breakup with travel. And so when I got back home, I moved back to Seattle. And from there, I kind of did the thing that everybody was doing when they actually graduated college, which was I bought a car, I got an office job, and I decided to become very planted, kind of the opposite of how I had been living.
Okay. But we know that that's not where the story ends, because you've written books on travel. So you might have taken a break from travel, but we put the relationship on pause, however you want to say it. But what brought you back? What got you going traveling again?
Well, I think it's funny, the lessons that the universe has in mind for us. Like that decision to break up with travel to me was super embarrassing personally. But it was a huge lesson, and you'll find like it was a pivotal point in my journey as a traveler. So, here I was thinking that I was very planted and I liked my office job. It was actually a pretty good one as far as office jobs go. I was working for Washington Trails magazine. But then one day I met this guy, and on our first date, we walked around Pike Place, and he told me that his big dream was to do a grand tour of Europe. And he had never traveled before. He didn't have a passport. And here was someone who didn't know anything about Europe. And I was so excited to be able to share my experiences over there and to help him craft this trip. And so, here I was giving him all this advice and stuff. And we ended up going out on a few more dates, and then a few more dates. And then it came to the point where, he was supposed to be leaving for Europe, and he paused his trip. And then we decided to see where things went between us. And then he finally asked me if I would go with him. And I knew this was a make or break the relationship kind of request. Like if I said, no, I'm just going to stay here, I'm planted now, I'm done with that, then I probably never would have seen him again, because he was going to go off on this grand tour of Europe and his life would have gone in a totally different direction. But instead, I had a lot of thinking to do, and the decision I came to was to go super, super part-time with my job and risk everything and go on this grand tour of Europe with him. So our plan was to spend probably around 4 months in Europe, and we combined all of our savings and we're really excited to go. But then when we got there, because I had had this really bad breakup with travel, I needed to do things very differently. I didn't want to do things the same way and burn out again and just feel like I was anywhere in the world. Like I wanted to feel like I was really somewhere. I wanted to connect with where I was. So we started taking these walks wherever we were, because in addition to writing, like the thing that I've always done in my life is hike. I love to hike, and I love to just hike, walk, anything. Like I am happiest if I'm out moving. So we started taking these long walks
Okay.
wherever we were. And pretty soon we started taking longer ones and then multi-day walks. And pretty soon we were doing trails that were 5-6 days long. And I had this big epiphany that actually this wasn't a break from travel. Like, this wasn't a break from the sightseeing or do anything like that, as much as it was a better way to travel. So through these hikes, I connected with locals who were in small towns where they really had a culture and where they were speaking the local language and cooking local food and listening to local music. And I got to see some of the most stunning natural beauty out there. It was just a win-win.
Okay. I'm going to pause you because I want to ask you an impossible question. Okay.
Okay.
I told you before there wasn't going to be any hard questions. I kind of lied, because this question, I admit, I'm prefacing this is probably next to impossible to answer, but I'm genuinely curious if you can. On that trip, on that whirlwind, not whirlwind, but that long European trip with your now husband, right?
Yes, now husband.
I better be saying that correctly. Yeah. Okay. All right. What was the single best food that you had on that trip?
Okay. Well, actually, I can answer this. There was a lot of good food on that trip, but there was this moment when we were in the countryside in France. We were somewhere in southern France. I don't remember the town specifically, but we were in this little hole-in-the-wall restaurant, and looking at the menu, I didn't know a lot about French food at that point, and I ordered jour de boeuf, and it was the most exquisite meal I've ever had in my entire life. So it's a beef cheek, and it was a slow cooked kind of French stew, and it just blew my mind.
Okay. And so that was for you. Okay. So that's a really, that's an unfair question of me to ask, because it's very few people could have answered that question as eloquently as you just did. They would have, I know if you asked me the same question, I'd be stammering all over myself. So that must have been an incredibly memorable experience for you. So that was, all right. That's awesome. So how long did you end up staying in Europe on that first trip?
Well, so, our plan had been to stay for about 4 months, and we had saved up enough money for that at a reasonable pace. And I was the budgeter in our little group. And so my husband was also working super part-time, and his job was on commission. So he helps companies sell on Amazon. So this client that he kept while we were traveling ended up just going bonkers. They did better than they had ever done before. And so we had money rolling in. And so we decided to just keep going and going. So we decided to go for month 5, month 6, month 7. And we actually ended up traveling for 9 months, a lot of it in Europe, but then we also went to Southeast Asia, spent some time in Thailand.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's actually amazing. And just the fact that, the world that we work in now, you can be remote, and whether you're walking and hiking in Europe or Southeast Asia, you can still be helping your Amazon clients, or whether you're sitting in Wenatchee, I can be talking to you today. It's amazing what technology lets us do.
Well, and the funny thing is, this was before people were really working remotely. And so, for example, to edit Washington Trails magazine, I would be sitting sometimes in the most wild places. I remember one night editing the magazine, sitting in an Irish bar while all the music was going on, because it was just as loud in our room, because we were staying in a room just above the pub anyways, the same building. And so, I was in the crowd and doing my work and thinking this is wild.
Yeah, that's very cool. So on this initial grand journey, this 9-month extreme, that's awesome that you were able to do that. Did you start to think about writing to document your experiences, or when did the idea for putting this down, quote unquote, pen on paper, when did this happen?
So we were in Ireland, and I remember it very specifically. That was when I started writing this book, because we decided to rent this big estate in out in the middle of nowhere for a week. And my plan was that I was going to write. And I think it was fall time because it was chilly. And my husband's main job, well, my now husband's main job, was to build me a fire every morning and keep the fire going all day long so I could sit in front of it and write. And the funny thing is, there was no desk in the room that I wanted to write. All we could find was this chest that was up in one of the bedrooms. And my husband actually disassembled it and put it together as a desk downstairs, which meant that we had to try to reassemble it when we left. This was an Airbnb. And so I got to write for an entire week. And I didn't want to document our travels. Like, I wasn't about sharing our stories of travel. The big compelling thing to me was that I so felt that hiking-based travel had solved my travel problem and changed the way that I traveled, that I really felt like it could help other people who were having the same issue. People, who were seasoned travelers, who were out there and who were just feeling like it wasn't really doing anything for them anymore. It wasn't fulfilling. It wasn't as enriching as they wanted. So I decided to write the book that I wished that I could have read, because when I was trying to do more hiking-based travel in Europe, there wasn't any information on that. Like, luckily I speak German, so I would read a lot of websites in German and figure out German trails to do. And I would search all over finding trails, but it took a lot of work. And so I wanted to take the guesswork out of that for other people, and then also prepare people for, what do you need to pack when you're going to go hiking in Europe? How do you need to prepare? Like, what do you need in terms of technology or gear? And then what do you need for travel health insurance? All of that kind of stuff, like the stuff that we were living every day on our big trip.
All right. In your opinion, what is a indispensable piece of gear you must have when traveling?
So for me, it's definitely my phone, and not just because it's a phone and a camera and all of that, but I actually hike with GPX tracks, and they're similar to Google driving directions, but they're for the trail. And they completely take the guesswork out of trying to figure out where you are on a map or trying to find a local map. Sometimes that can be a pain. And so for me, GPX tracks have really revolutionized how I hike, and they make me feel a lot safer when I'm hiking in more remote spots, because I can see where I am on there and I can see where the trail is. And as long as those 2 points, are one on top of another, I know I'm in the right spot. I can be very confident. And so I highly recommend GPX tracks, and I actually package them with my books now.
Okay. So let me ask you this, though. You have your phone, and your carrier is, it's one of three probably. It's Verizon, T-Mobile, or AT&T, right?
Right.
That's your. So how easy is it to notify your provider of cell coverage that you're going? Because my understanding is the cell frequencies that the bandwidth that they use in Europe is different than what we use here in the States. So how do you have another phone that you use when you're in Europe, or are you able to use, and sake of conversation, it's an iPhone, your trusty iPhone goes with you. How do you handle that? What I perceive to be a challenge with tech.
That's a great question. So it has really changed over the years. Actually, that first trip, I would mainly connect to Wi-Fi, and I would, the first trip that we did, I didn't hike so much with GPX tracks. But as I've evolved with hiking in Europe, I've added those in quite a bit more. So the second stage was kind of using a local SIM. So I would take my SIM out and put in a German SIM, which would give me also like a German number. And then, it was super cheap to have data and to have a number over there. And then recently what I've switched to is an eSIM, which is super cool. It's a little tricky the first time that you install one, but you can install it before you leave on your trip, and you can pick either like a country or you can pick a regional package. And because I tend to go for long periods of time, I do something like that. So I don't really notify my carrier and say, hey, I'm traveling internationally, or, deal with the overages. I buy those local SIMs or do the eSIM now.
Okay.
And it makes it really cheap. Like I was
Okay.
just in Europe for 3 weeks, and to have all the data that I needed with my eSIM, it was only $20 for the whole 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's cheap. Very cheap. Okay. All right. So that's your go-to. Your phone is your security blanket, if you will. It's not, I mean, it's like it lets you feel comfortable when you can look at the map and you feel comfortable that you're in the place you're expected to be in. Okay.
And there are a couple other things that I think are hugely essential, because you don't need a whole lot of stuff to be hiking in Europe, because I mean, you can pick a super remote trail, but the truth is the trails just aren't as remote as they are here in the US. And you don't have to worry about things like bears, so it's not like you're having to carry bear canisters and all of that stuff around. But my two big essentials: one, comfortable shoes that are waterproof, because you never know when you're going to be outside on a muddy, wet day, and then a comfortable backpack.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have those two things, you're pretty set anywhere you want to go.
So when you say comfortable shoes, you're not, and I'm teasing when I say this, you're not running around the trails in high heels. But what do you mean by comfortable shoes? Are you talking like a hiking boot, or are you talking about a really broken in pair of Nikes? What do you, give me a little bit more specifics?
So as long as it's waterproof and it has good tread on the bottom, you can kind of go with whatever. Mm-hmm. Some people really love trail runners because they're light. I always hike in a low top hiking boot that's lightweight. Other people really do like the high tops, like my husband likes his high top hiking boots. But for me, I like to go with something that's low profile. And then what I do a lot of times too is there's actually a style of shoe called a European walking shoe. And it's brands like Erevan, Mephisto, Naturalizer. They have shoes like this, and they're waterproof, mm-hmm. and they have good tread on the bottom, but they look more like street tennis shoes. And so, you can pair them with a nicer outfit to be able to wear them out in town. So you're not packing town shoes and trail shoes. It's kind of nice to just have one.
Yeah. Save the weight and the space.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. There's been a change in your life since you started hiking. You got married, so there's that. That's a change. But now, young children.
Yes.
I can't imagine any complexities adding young children to a hike. How has that been for you from a logistics standpoint? Are you taking? So you just said you got back from Europe. You were in Europe for 3 weeks. Was it just you, or did you have a child or children with you?
So actually, this trip was a present to me. I had a big birthday in November, and I told my husband I wanted to do this super challenging trail called Tour de Mont Blanc, which is you go to Italy, Switzerland, and France as you walk around this big mountain. So it was a treat that we actually didn't have kids on this trip. But for most of my trips now, I do have kids. And it doesn't get complicated simply because we bring them, but because when we bring them, that means that we have to hike with them on our backs. And so it has become a really good workout, and it's a lot of trying to figure out the logistics of it. But it really led to a shift in how I hike in Europe. So I used to be really big into multi-day trips and going out and walking a long trail of, say a week. And every night you're staying at a different either mountain hut, or you're staying in a different village. And it's really cool because you can see a lot of the countryside that way. But when you have a crib and diapers and all of the things that kids come with, trying to pack up every night is so difficult. And so I have shifted to what I call home-based hiking Europe. And that is what my new book is on. And it actually came about because I wanted a way to explore Europe on foot still. And I had these kids, and I didn't want to spend all of this time away from my kids. I love being on trail in Europe, and I wanted to bring my kids into it. And so I had to figure out a way to fuse them. So I did kind of on accident. Like I had taken my first daughter, June, over to Europe when she was only 14 months old. And I led a tour, like a village to village tour with her on my back. And I did the crazy logistics. And after that, I was like, you know what? Like, I need to do this differently. So I picked two different Austrian towns. One was a mountain village, and then the other one was a lake town. And I spent a week in each destination doing day hikes from there. And we didn't switch accommodations, except for just going from the one town to the other town after a week had passed. And it was so much easier. And we got to see a different kind of hiking in Europe because we had a lot more village time and we got to know our village deeper. And so that was when I had the epiphany of, oh my goodness, okay, I'm in for another book because, there are a lot of people out there who don't want to switch accommodations every night, who need kind of exploring Europe on foot light, including me. And so I'm going to write this guide to help other people as well.
Okay. So let's talk about the actual nuts and bolts of writing the book. How did you determine what hike to put in? We've got multiple things here, and we'll, I'll probably quiz you on the Austrian part, just like I said, but how did you walk us through how you kind of gave me the idea of how you came up with the idea. Now, how did you pick the various sections for the book?
So I do a lot of armchair traveling when I'm at home, and I do a lot of research, and I keep checklists of all the places that I want to go. And so it took me a while to dial down my 10 destinations that I wanted to cover for this book. And once I had the destinations, then it was just a lot of research, looking at hike forums, reaching out to local hikers in those areas that I'm friends with and getting their opinions, and doing everything I could to stay off the beaten track, because I don't want to drive people to the main spots of Europe. Like, I want to take them just far enough off track that they still have a really comfortable experience, but that they actually get to feel like sometimes they're the only visitor around. Like, that's really kitty.
Right.
And so it's a lot of talking to people. And I mean, I talk to like French hiking groups, and I have friends who live in Bavaria and have hiked probably everything in Bavaria, and I ask their opinion a lot. And so I had my like final list of hikes, I would say my short list. And then I go over to Europe, and with this book, we went over for 3 months, and we brought the kids, and we did it as a family. And then it was going through and hiking everything on my short list, and then taking it down even more to the hikes that would be featured in the book.
Okay. I've got a couple of questions from that. Number one, at the time that you were doing this, how old were your kids?
At the time, my kids were 1 and 3. Which was pretty wild. So the 1-year-old actually was the easier one. And I believe my 3-year-old actually had just turned 4. So 1 and 4. The 1-year-old just rode on my husband's back, and she was very chill about it most of the time. But the 4-year-old was a little more complicated. We had gotten her hiking back at home, and we live in Snohomish, and we have a lot of great trails out by us. And so we were taking her out on these trails, and we kind of trained her up to doing 5 miles by herself of just walking without being carried or anything. And then as soon as we got to Europe and we went to do our first hike, she laid on the asphalt at the trailhead, and she refused to move. So that was a big problem, because our schedule is so compressed when we're over there. Like, we have to be hiking every single day, basically. And we have to hike usually in the mornings and just into the early afternoon, because my husband has a job. So he has to log on to his job in the afternoon and run client calls and stuff. So we have this compressed window that we have to fit all of this research into. And here she just wasn't moving. And so my husband was getting really frustrated. And I thought, you know what, like, I can change this, and I'm just going to take this upon myself. And I literally did that. I put her in the backpack that was on my back, even though she was 45 pounds, and I had stuff in the backpack. And I decided it was going to be trail CrossFit. And I was just going to look at this as like a super killer workout. And so toward the end of our 3 months in Europe, we actually got her to do some walking by herself, and we learned how to motivate her on trail, and it became easier. But I tell you what, I came back in the best shape of my life.
I bet. So here's next impossible question, because it's asking your daughter's opinion. Which hike do you think your daughter enjoyed the most?
Are you there? Oh, can you repeat that? Because you froze for a
I'm
second.
here. Okay. Impossible question. Which hike do you think your daughter enjoyed the most?
So I know exactly which one she enjoyed the most. And it's funny to me because she was hiking on the back of a donkey. She really loves hiking on donkeys. And so we took her through the French countryside and she rode this this donkey named Cannabis. And we went, it was kind of an example to show you don't have to just hike. Like there are other ways to hike other than just using your feet. Like you can use pack mules and there are other ways you can get creative if by chance you have mobility issues or, you just don't like to walk far. So this was some research into how to do that. And so she was the one who got to ride on the donkey. And that was her favorite day of our entire 3 months.
All right. Well, I can kind of see, that'd be kind of fun. All right. So you compressed all this into 3 months and you took your notes and your data back and you sat down and in an evening you wrote a book. No. Realistically, how long did it take you to take your notes and put it into the book that you sent over for, the first draft of it? How long did that take you?
So I had done all the notes on trail, like we said, and I would try to take notes in the evenings. And my goal had been to research during the day and then do my drafting at night. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to go back home with a pretty much completed book. There's just going to be some content, about packing and preparing that I'll need to do when I get home, but like no big deal. And then the girls wouldn't go to sleep at night and I never got the work time that I needed. So when I got back, I wrote everything in 5 months. So I had 5 months to put together, like to clean up my notes, to do all the maps, to clean up all the photos, and to do all of the writing for the bigger sections of the book.
Yeah, because the book is laid out. I mean, the book is laid out very well. And I mean, mountaineers, every book I've seen from mountaineers, they do a really nice job of presenting the book, the content. But you've got your maps, and this is laid out really, really nicely. The photographs, did you or your husband take the photographs, or did you, how did we get these?
So in my first book, I took probably 95% of the photos because I really like taking photos. And then in this book, I think it was down to probably about 50%. Well, maybe 60%, because I couldn't concentrate so much on the photos because I had the girls. And so, yeah, but still the majority of them are mine.
Walk me through, I'm never going to pronounce the name right, the Austrian tour. What's the valley name? Please help me.
Yeah, it's called the Wachau Valley. So in English, I mean, it's spelled with a W. Pronounce that. But yeah, in German, they pronounce it V, Wachau.
Okay, Wachau. All right. So let's use the Wachau. And so I'm looking at this and you've got, here's a quick thing. It's like, it's in northeastern Austria. You give the name of the home base. Local language is German. Use of English, widely understood and used. I love it. Family friendly. You give it 4 stars. I'd love to know your criteria on that, but we'll circle to that. And you give it a cost of $3 signs, not $3. You say it's good to go March to October. You got extensive vineyards, farmlands, abbeys, castles, wine, tiny wine producing villages. Okay, 2 questions. Family friendly, how did you define that for the purposes of this book?
So some of that is based off the hikes themselves and how long they are and how much elevation gain they had. And if little legs could do that, or if parents carrying littles could do that easily. Then I also looked at what activities were around that kids would actually be interested in. So in the Wachau Valley, there are these little spots called Heuriges where you can stop for wine along the way. It's early season wine. And at a lot of those Heuriges, they have playgrounds. And so the parents can be drinking a glass of wine and eating some really good Austrian comfort food while the kids happily play next to them on the playgrounds. and there are little petting zoos that they can visit.
Okay.
There is bus and train transportation. And so it's easy to get kids around, and kids like those methods of transportation. And then, also is cost. So some places like Switzerland are harder when you're bringing kids because everything is so expensive. But a place like Dürnstein in the Wachau Valley is really reasonably priced. And so you can feel good about bringing a family there and not break the bank.
So what do you think? And this is, once again, I ask you these impossible questions, but like for your family, 2 adults, 2 children, what would an average day cost?
So, well, let's talk for a second about like what our day looks like, because that will give you some insight into why it costs, how much it costs. So, we get up in the morning, we fix breakfast usually in the place that we're staying, unless the place that we're staying includes breakfast, which I would say happens like half the time. It's just included in the price. So, if we're waking up in a spot that doesn't offer breakfast, then we've gone to the store for some yogurt or eggs or different things. Then we're hiking for several hours. And when we're hiking, we might stop once, twice, depending on the trail. Like some trails have a lot of opportunities to stop at mountain huts along the way, or cool spots where you want to, get an appetizer or a glass of wine or different things. So we usually eat lunch when we're on trail. Sometimes we bring it, but most of the time we eat out. And then for us, like dinner is usually at our place because we're going to try to put our kids down soon. And then, the next day we do it again. Okay. And so there are some special things thrown in there. Like we went to this really cool circus, and, we find really cool spots to explore in between our hiking as well. But when you add all of that up, it's really not that much money. So, the average price of a beer on trail in Europe is around €4. I mean, can you just imagine going and finding like a good $4 beer? We're not talking like Coors Light or anything like that. We're talking like a good local cold brew for €4. And then, most meals in Europe are going to be around €10. And that's for really good comfort food. So most of our accommodations end up being around €100 a night, which, I mean, good luck trying to find a hotel that's nice in the US for that, right? Or a bed and breakfast or anything. So I would say on average, we probably spend about $150 a day. And that's when we're like kind of living it up. There are days that are also like cheaper than that.
Okay. So really, in the grand scheme of things, I mean, what would it cost a family of 4 to go to Disneyland for a day? I mean, $150 a person.
Yeah.
Right. So
walking-based travel is really affordable because your big activity every day is walking. It's not buying admission into expensive attractions or, traveling large distances where you're paying a lot of money. So it's probably the most affordable way you can travel.
Right. And airfare, surprisingly, is quite reasonable between Seattle and Frankfurt, Seattle and Paris, Seattle and London. Kenzie flies in and out, and I swear they must fold her up and put her in the overhead bin because she doesn't pay very much for tickets. I don't know, but it seems, I seem to pay as much to fly from Seattle to Dallas as she does from, she typically flies Frankfurt or Munich here. So you don't have to spend a lot to get over there as well.
Right. And then especially, once you get over there, then everything is going to be a lot less expensive. Like going out to eat just meal for meal is less expensive, because Europeans don't tip and they don't have the added tax on top of everything. Like it's already folded in. So there are a lot of ways that you can save money.
I like how you've got grocery stores listed. You got recommendations of things to do, definitions of some food.
I wanted people to really get the essence of these destinations, and then also, see them through a hiker's lens. So, one of the things I include is an outdoor store that's in the area. That way, if your trekking pole's broke, or if you need a backpack because you've been on a longer trip and now you're going to do some hiking, like there's a place to go and get that. And what food should you really look for on trail? Like what's the best of the best? Where should you spend your time and energy? So I wanted to give all of that, but through the hiking lens.
Okay, I'm going to pause you because I have a question I normally ask my guests later in the episode, but today I'm going to do it differently because I'm going to ask you the same question with two separate answers. Okay.
Okay.
So I always ask my guests, where's a good place to get a cup of coffee near you? So since you're in Snohomish, that question will be part two. But my first question is, you mentioned a day trip to Vienna, coffee served by a tuxedoed server. Where's the best place that you've had coffee in Europe?
Well, the best place that I've had coffee in Europe is definitely in Vienna. And I forget the name of the actual cafe, but it's in like the inner ring in Vienna with the tuxedoed waiters and all of that. And it was a place that Freud used to go. And all of these, deep thinkers would go and they would have discussions every day. And some of them, like some famous painters and stuff, would get their mail there. Like, can you imagine being at a coffee shop so much that you have your mail delivered there instead of to your home? And so the coffee shops in Vienna are just so
yes,
iconic.
I can. So, all right. So Vienna. So now let's ask that question now. At home in Snohomish, where's a great place for coffee?
Well, I think there are two possible answers here. One is the obvious, like everybody loves Looking Glass. And that's where everybody goes, if you're from out of town and you're coming and discovering Snohomish for the first time. Has a lot of velvet in the interior and it looks really cool and stuff. But there's another coffee shop just down the road and it's called Proper Joe. And if you're real local, like that's where you go because it's not, they have like little groups of old people, talking about books and stuff like that. And it's a lot less busy, but it's just, I love it. It's my favorite spot to go.
No, you have to see the disconnect. Your favorite coffee in Europe served to you by tuxedoed waiters, and your coffee in Snohomish is called Proper Joe. I really applaud you for the breadth of that appreciation of coffee. So when you order coffee, what's your go-to coffee drink?
I really love either like a decaf Americano or I take a decaf latte. And it was about 5 years ago that I switched from fully caffeinated to decaf. And, it used to give me jitters sometimes or keep me awake. And so I'm very happy because I never drank coffee for the caffeine anyways. And it's for the taste. And so, yeah.
Okay. And you find Proper Joe has a good tasting decaf?
They do. Yeah.
Okay. Because that's one of the problems. Yes, I can make fun of decaf. That's easy to make fun of decaf. That's low hanging fruit. But part of the problem with decaf for me is that there's been a very small number of places that have made the roast of the beans. You can't tell that it's, I don't want to say it's inferior, but decaf has a different flavor profile to me.
Well, and especially there are some places, I won't name names on big companies that sell coffee, but some places where you get the decaf and it tastes burnt, and it always tastes burnt. And so, yes, I know exactly what you're saying. Like the flavor of decaf can go so wrong.
And I don't like that. That's what so when I poo-poo decaf, it's not because of the lack of caffeine, it's because of the lack of good flavor.
Right.
Okay. So your best coffee in Europe is in Vienna. You answered your best on your first trip. You told me about your French food. On this trip that you used for research for the Home Base Hiking Europe book, what food did any food stand out on any of these 10 areas? Is there one that rises above for food? You say, yeah, if you're into food, go do this one. This is where you should go.
Yes, for sure. So I'm a huge fan of German food and German culture and all of that. And in Bavaria, I think you get some of the very best German food there is. And so there's one destination in my book called Berchtesgaden National Park, and it's in southern Germany, right next to the border with Austria. And the food there is just out of this world. I mean, you can get Wiener Schnitzel, you can get Apfelstrudel and Kaiserschmarrn and just all of the really good hearty German dishes and pork knuckles and all of that. And the food is just consistently really, really good, which is really nice that it's, I mean, you're walking a lot, so you feel like you can eat a lot, which is a great balance.
Right. You're burning those calories so that you can splurge on something without feeling guilty.
Yes.
Okay. So for somebody who's thinking about going and doing some walking in Europe and they're looking for resources, your book, obviously, but what's another, I'm looking at the front cover of it right now, and there's some beautiful shots on the front cover that just, make me go, I wish I was in Europe right now. What could a potential reader expect as the biggest type of takeaway from your book?
I think the biggest takeaway from this book is that even if you're not ready to do a multi-day trek in Europe, even if you don't want to do a multi-day trek in Europe, you can get all of the benefits of exploring Europe on foot in an easier package by doing things slightly different and by staying in one town and doing day hikes from there. And I think for me, it was life-changing because it meant that after becoming a parent, I could still do my passion and be on trail in Europe. And I think there are a lot of people who maybe they're older, and they can do some activity, but they can't go crazy. Well, this kind of travel is actually really accessible because in a lot of places there are gondolas, that get you up to the good hikes. And then you can walk around at the high elevation and then either walk down or take a gondola back down. And so there's so many ways to make this more accessible that you really don't have to be a super athlete, and you don't have to be someone, who's 25 on a sabbatical. You can be a young family out there doing this together. You can be, 80. And I meet a lot of older people on trail who are super active and they're really living their best retirement. And Europe has enough facilities to actually make that very doable for almost anyone. So it's way more accessible than you would ever think. Okay. And then here's how to do it.
Okay. I'm kind of teasing you with this. Okay. So understand I'm teasing you. And for the listeners, we're having a bit of lag in our conversation. So I have to be very clear when I say I'm teasing her because she may not see my face to understand I'm tongue planted firmly in cheek. This book has a foreword by this guy that I don't know. I mean, Rick Steves. Who the heck is Rick Steves? Why'd you get him to write a foreword on a travel book in Europe? I mean, how on earth? I mean, because he's okay. First off, one of the things is Rick Steves' company is based in Edmonds. I mean, he's a Washington guy. And he went to UW. He's a local. Okay, well, all right. Anyway, no, just kidding. No, so the thing is that Rick Steves is that he. In some ways, I think Rick Steves has made the idea of European travel in our contemporary age really well known with his show and his company and all this stuff. And yet here he is writing a foreword for your book. How do you know Rick?
So my publisher sent him my first book, which is called Explore Europe on Foot. And it was actually sitting on his desk in his office. And I heard this later, and I hadn't heard anything from him. And then I happened to run into him at a Seattle Men's Chorus event at Benaroya Hall. And I saw him there, and we had never met. And I said, oh, look, there's Rick Steves. And some family friends that I was with said, oh, you've got to go introduce yourself. And I thought, no, I don't want to do that. How embarrassing. He has no idea who I am. But finally I worked up the courage, and I went up to him and I said, hi, I'm Cassandra Overby. My publisher sent you my book. Maybe you saw it. And he looked at me and smiled and said, oh yeah, it's on my desk in my office. And So, he promised that he would give it a look. And then he invited me on his radio show to talk about hiking in Europe because he liked the concept. And when we did that first recording for radio, we just found out that we just love talking. I mean, we really bond. We have the very same approach to travel, which is go slightly off the beaten path, and try to find your own spots.
Right.
And he is really good about trying to teach people how to do that. And I do it just in a different way. My way is hiking. And so, I think it was cool because he has seen so much. I mean, if anyone could burn out on travel, you would think it could be Rick Steves, right? And so
I think so.
My book was a fresh way for him to see Europe. And so he invited me to teach at his travel center, and we just kept really enjoying working together. And then he invited me to be his mountain guide for his show. And so we filmed an episode for his TV show, and it was in the French Alps, and I got to fly over there, and I got to take him on Tour de Mont Blanc. And so, I got to show him the trail,
cool.
show him the mountain huts, all of these places that I really love. And he's not someone who is naturally outdoorsy. That wasn't one of his interests. But after seeing Europe kind of through this lens, he decided that he wanted to go back and hike it himself, like the full trail. And so he's become a hiker, and he likes to go on hikes in Europe, which is really cool for me to see, because this thing that I'm so excited about and that I'm really passionate about, I get to see it, even in someone who has been everywhere and done everything, and they find it exciting. And so that's really fulfilling. So when he heard I was writing this book, he said, well, you better write that book or I'm going to write it. And then, he was someone that I could kind of bounce ideas off of. He's been a good friend and mentor. And then he offered to write the foreword to it, which was so generous. And he's been a really great supporter. And so it's really nice that, we Washingtonians are kind of sticking together. And I've very much appreciated his mentorship.
Yeah. So when Mountaineers Press sent me a copy of the book, and I'm like, I kind of did the double take. I was like, what? Rick Steves? What? And then, there's a photo of you and Rick here, and it's just, very cool. I mean, kudos, So I got a couple of questions. Number one, the book can be found everywhere. So this book is easy to find if you're interested in books. Local bookstores in Washington State are going to carry it. It's available online. There's this little company no one's ever heard of called Amazon that, probably has it, in dozens of warehouses across the world. But I'm going to put you on the spot. You weren't prepared for this question, and you might not have an answer, and that's okay. Do you have an idea for another book?
Yes.
Is there another book that's on the horizon?
There's so many books on the horizon. So yes,
Okay.
My plan is to start next summer, actually, research and writing single country hiking guidebooks for Europe. So it'll be like explore Germany on foot, explore France on foot, titles like that.
Okay. So that's not an endless series, but it'll take you a number of years to crank those out, Okay, that's very cool. You also have this amazing website name called exploreonfoot.com. And so you offer the ability. Do you help people set their itineraries up, and do you provide some guidance there?
I do. So I actually work in a couple different ways. One, I'm often a trail matchmaker for people. So they'll book
matchmaker.
So they'll book my shorter consultation, and then they'll be able to tell me their interests, their abilities, what language skills they have. Kind of, I get the whole package of what they have to offer. And then I get to go and sift through my huge internal database of trails and recommend what I think they would most enjoy in Europe. And so in that way, I get to recommend spots and trails to people based on, what they want to do and how much they can do. And then if people are ready to book a trip, then they can book a longer travel consultation. And with that, I help people with their accommodations. I help them find luggage transfer if they want to do, say a week-long trail, but they don't want to carry all of their stuff on their back. I also help them with transportation and connecting that hiking portion of their trip to maybe a larger trip. And then also help them go over their gear list and their preparations, kind of anything required to make this trip happen.
So kind of a hiking concierge, if you will.
Yeah.
You're right. Okay. Awesome. All right. We're going to shift gears to your life in Snohomish. So when you're not raising children, or maybe when you are, what do you guys like? I guess the answer is going to be you're going to go hiking, but what do you guys like to do in the Snohomish area? What's fun and exciting for you and the family?
Well, we do like to go hiking, and now I have this amazing hiking group that goes out and explores all over around here. And sometimes we have like 10 or 12 moms and 25 kids, and we go out on a weekly basis. And then I also like to travel all around Washington because exploring is my favorite thing to do. So that's what we did all summer, was go to places like Rainier. But when we are in Snohomish, we're either super local, meaning like we're hanging out with our chickens and our cats and our neighbors' cows and goats, or, we're going out to the valley.
Okay.
We really like to hang out in the valley doing like mini golf. And my daughter plays soccer in the valley now. And there are a lot of really cool spots to go in downtown Snohomish. So we hang out with friends a lot in downtown.
Okay. Because if you can't tell, I've asked you about food at least 3 times during the show. So the 4th time for food is, where's a great place to grab lunch in the Snohomish area?
Ooh, so a really great place to grab lunch is a place called, I need to look up the new name. Can we pause for a second? Because it had a name change recently.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. It used to be Krista's Sandwich Board. Okay. So if you're going to go out for lunch in Snohomish, my favorite spot is a little place called Heidi's Sandwich Board. And there they have the most amazing soups and the most amazing sandwiches. And they're like really big deli sandwiches. And so you have like 5 layers of meat and cheese and all of the things. But it's a really great spot.
So what I'm going to put you on this thing, what sandwich are you recommending I try?
Ooh, I don't stick with the same sandwich, but probably.
I know, but what are you recommending?
One of my favorites for this time of year is the turkey cranberry.
Okay. See, you're a trail matchmaker. You got to match me up with a sandwich now. I got to get you to kind of, find a good sandwich for me. That actually sounds quite good. And I didn't give you any sort of information. And, if you would have said pumpkin, the connection would have gone bad very quickly. But you didn't know that because I'm not a fan of not the pumpkins on a sandwich necessarily. But anyway, okay, all right. So here's the question I warned you about. Okay. To set the stage, it's a very straightforward question. You must answer it, and you must give your reason why.
Okay.
Okay. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Cake or pie, and why?
I'm going to say definitely pie. And I really love cherry pie. It's one of my favorite things in the world. I also really love apple pie. And I think a lot of times cake can be too dry, or the frosting can feel like icky sweet, like when they put artificial sweeteners in there. But pie is just going to be naturally sweet and added real sugar. And so also, little known fact, I once won a pie eating contest by beating out every single person to speed eat an entire blueberry pie.
How old were you when you did this?
I think I was 10.
You were a kid. Okay. And when you say a pie, are we talking a normal size pie? Yes. Or
no.
Was this
we're talking a full normal size pie. And to this day, I do not like blueberry pie because of that experience.
Well, I can't blame you. Now, was it one of those ones where you couldn't use your hands, that you had to just like get your face in the whole thing, or were you allowed utensils on this?
No utensils.
So it was the whole face in the pie.
Yep.
Oh, geez. Okay. Well, kudos to you. You are the first guest to win a pie eating contest. Perfect. That's okay. So that's interesting. I mean, by the way, there's no wrong answers to that question. It's just really interesting to listen to people's explanations and justifications of their choice. You said cherry, you said apple. Okay. With or without ice cream?
With. I definitely like my pie heated up with ice cream.
With pie heated with ice cream?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. The last question for today for you, and then we'll release you to the wild. Is there something that we should have talked about that we didn't?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think we hit.
Well, Cassandra, thank you for sitting down with me today. You're the first guest at I don't know what episode number this is going to be, but it will be over 300. You're the first guest in over 300 episodes that we've allowed to talk about Europe. And because we're all about exploring Washington State, right?
Right.
And yet here you are, from a home base in Snohomish in Washington State, going out. And the thing that impresses me, and this is the thing I was thinking about, I've never been to Europe, even though my daughter lives there. And, when she listens to this, she'll probably call me and remind me, yeah, you've never been there. No, just kidding, Kenzie. She doesn't talk like that. Europe is beautiful. We've all seen beautiful, stunning photographs from all around Europe, whether it be Italy, England, Sweden, Austria, wherever, right? There's beautiful, beautiful scenery across that whole area. And you choose to come back here. You choose to stay in Washington State. That is to me, maybe one of the biggest endorsements for our state of any of our guests. You go out, you hike around a beautiful part of the world. You get to do these things. You get to meet people from different cultures, experience different activities that are done in a different way. And yet when the day is over, maybe it's a few days, maybe it's a few months worth of days, but you come back to Washington. So I think that was a perfect reason to have you on the show.
Well, I think hiking in Europe has given me a greater appreciation for Washington, actually, because, once I started exploring all of these other places in countries like Austria and Slovenia and Germany, I started to get more curious about what we had here. And so it's something that I've been really passionate about teaching my girls too is, it's not just about big adventures, although we have really amazing scenery and we have really amazing things in Washington. It's the attitude that you explore with, right? Like it's our attitude that we take when we're going to go out in Snohomish, that we expect that we're going to find something cool. Like we're going to not look at this just as the place that we grew up. Right. And, trying to take my girls to Mount Rainier National Park, like I took them for the first time this summer. And, and things like that can be so transformational. Like I look at how wherever we are when we're driving, when we see Mount Rainier now, they look and they say, hey, look, it's Mount Rainier. And my youngest calls it her mountain, and so, yes, I'm getting to show them these amazing places in Europe, but I'm getting to also show them these really amazing places in Washington and help them appreciate it, because so many people grow up in Washington, and because you're so used to where you grow up, you don't really have the drive to explore very much, right? Like it's just where you grow up. But I think if you can even take that travel mindset and shift it to have different eyes for where you live, like people are they can be amazed by everything we have to offer.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today. This was great. I wish you great success with the book and all of your books and the future books. Thank you for being a wonderful guest.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm very happy I'm the first person to talk about Europe.
Hope you enjoyed the show. You can reach me on Twitter at ExploreWaState. I'd love to hear your comments. You can also visit our website at explorewashingtonstate.com. If you know anyone who would like the show, it'd be amazing if you'd share the show with them. This is the biggest way that we grow this show. Good old word of mouth. Glad you were here with me today, and I hope to have you listening to the next episode. See you then.